Hi everyone, my name is Josh Davis. I'm a systems integrator with UberEther Software Solutions. I have a background with and interest in PKI, identity access management, cloud services, automation, sec DevOps, and some data analytic visualizations with an operational focus. I'm here today to talk about insider threats, specifically systems that aggregate behavioral-centric data, visualize and alert on an organizational threat trends and changing threat postures. For the next few minutes, we'll dive into what is an insider threat monitoring system, discuss user and entity behavior analytics, the value provided by a common operating picture, which is the core visual analytic component of your insider threat monitoring program, call out a few products on the market that may already reside in your baseline, and close it out with some operational perspectives. An insider threat monitoring system is an application or applications working together that analyze continuously the behavior of users and entities, which are systems, applications, and devices, to determine, visualize, and alert on the risk of unintended access, data loss, and other threats to your organization by your insiders. This visual here is from Splunk, their user risk scoring component. It's an example of a common operating picture that we'll talk about later. It has historical graphing panels. This one is in hours, but it allows you to dive deeper into longer periods of time. And then also your threat posture level panel at the bottom. The information here is presented at a very high level, showing aggregated and summarized results that analysts and ISOs, operational individuals, anyone that makes up your insider threat program team can use to identify threats and drill down into the finer grained information about any of the findings to gain an insight that they need to mitigate the threats. And you may be asking that this is a SIEM, right? A security information event manager tool, like your ArcSight. Sure, that may be what it looks like, but an insider threat monitoring system, it's not your traditional SIEM. It adds to what those systems have been missing for a long time to gain that holistic view of insider threats. It adds to behaviors of users and entities and a continuous historical analysis beyond your typical threat signatures and real-time alerting. Let's talk about some key concepts of such a system. So first, the whole person strategy. So the US CERT National Insider Threat Center out of Carnegie Mellon talks about an insider threat program or associated systems needing to address the whole person strategy, which is basically just a continuous evaluation of employees for insider threats. The strategy is addressed by technology sitting on top of what could be considered big data, which is often unstructured and disjointed among the organization's critical work streams. And it includes your data loss prevention systems, your SIEMs, your physical endpoints and corresponding location information, PAM, the privileged access management systems, and data from identity governance systems. And then you overlay all of that data with a behavioral engine leveraging digital forensics and other analytic techniques like data mining, machine learning, prediction, and statistics. And altogether, the system provides a holistic technical approach to aid in determining the needles in the haystacks that are putting your organization, data, personnel, and your customers at risk. Alerting is another component of an insider threat monitoring system. Alerting based upon threat thresholds and key trends you have identified. It aids those that prefer email or Slack-like channels over dashboards. And with that, from like a chat ops-like perspective, it gains the ability to be proactive and reactive. So you can proactively increase an insider's threat score and reactively pull their access based upon what the system is seeing and what it's analyzing. And if it's not something that's automatic, then it can at least kick off a reauthorization governance workflow. Another pretty important concept of an insider threat monitoring system should be, and it should be included, should be configured for, is accounting for the organization's porous perimeters. So this is like the Beyond Corp zero trust position, which, as you all know, is the idea that The organization has no boundaries and trusts no one. And this is because the organization is made up of not just on-prem employees, but also those that are remote and contractors, the storage of sensitive information and subsequent applications that manage the information collectively exists in a hybrid hosting model. There's often never a common authentication and authorization approach for the collective systems. Bring your own devices encouraged, there's no MDM, and so on. A smart insider will be deceitful or malicious at the weakest point, where they're tracked the least. And this isn't an original thing that I came up with myself, right? But it's something to be cognizant of and consider when you're implementing such a system and maturing such a system. Your insider threat program's monitoring system should be configured to account for the web of authentication and authorization flows to your sensitive data by a variety of insider types from any location using potentially any device. Historical behavior analytics is a key differentiator between an insider threat monitoring system and a traditional SIEM-like tool. Tracking and analyzing the behavior of users and entities more accurately improves the detection of insider threats among those that are typically good, those that are becoming bad, and outsiders that are spoofing an insider's identity. When talking about behaviors, what we're describing are deviations from the norm, not routine. Occurrences very often that build over time. Insiders beginning to fly under the radar, looking at what they're not doing or are no longer doing and should be. Disgruntledness, hostile, tardiness, keeping odd hours, irregular work patterns. Actually enthusiasm to work on more tasks in other areas could be an indicator of wanting more access to more data for malicious reasons. Behavior-related activity on the network and activity off the network, where they are and associated activity based upon location. Indicators of testing security limits of the network, applications, and physical borders, and then contextual and psychosocial. How are patterns established? You first need to identify who your users and entities are. What are your sources of truth? Are they adequately classified with associated attributes defined, levels of access, types of data they have access to or provide access to, number of permissions across the organization, percentage of sensitive data they have access to. And then you need all the other data to round off the whole insider, starting with the cyber and physical information from your SIEM, your DLP, your PAM solutions. If possible, HR data, personnel records, are people on vacation? Are they putting in a full-time card? Is someone on disability leave? If you have access, results from background checks, and any information from public records. And if you suspend reality for a moment, and you assume your organization is pretty rock solid on the physical and cyber pieces, which is your activity-based analytics. The organization knows exactly who their users and entities are. And they're very aware of the activity on the network and among the perimeters. And then ask yourself, does the contextual and the psychosocial characteristics, which are part of content-based and inferential analytics, enrich their risk profile? You cannot truly know who your insiders are without considering these characteristics. When we talked about contextual, we're talking about financials, credit reports, large purchases, abnormal financial deposits, travel, police reports. And on the psychosocial side, we're talking about the insider's combined influence that psychological factors and the surrounding social environment have on their physical and mental wellness and their ability to function, which includes perception and cognition, what motivates them, personality characteristics, and their interpersonal relationships. Your threat score inside the organization may be low, but moderately or high on the contextual or psychosocial sides, which may very well indicate that over time, a good insider starts to become bad. And having access to this type of behavior data about your users and entities and analyzing it with your insider threat monitoring system is super critical. But you do have to keep in mind and be realistic about compliance with applicable laws, the organization's ethical and privacy policies, civil liberties, being transparent as part of employee and partner agreements. Common operating picture. First and foremost, the common operating picture is more than a static dashboard that only changes when monthly vulnerability scans are run, or when security or operation uses it to do incident investigation. The common operating picture visualizes the results of the continuously occurring behavior analytics to provide an ever-changing insider risk situational awareness. It provides an interface where many work streams can work together and collaborate against a common pane of glass to support the same mission of protecting data and protecting human life. Because on the psychosocial side, we're talking about workplace violence mitigations as well. Local operating pictures are subprograms that feed complementary data to a higher level insider threat focus group's common operating picture. Examples of these local operating pictures can be as simple as your PAM, your DLP, your log analytics system, SIMS. The common operating picture provides a pulse of your environment, a holistic sense of what's going on. It's a feeling. If it looks right, it feels right. You know your steady state, and you can easily visualize when that changes. And from a visual perspective, it's very much a parallel to your traditional enterprise management of systems and applications, your basic port health checks, service status, processes. And in addition to graphing, the common operating picture provides a deep dive functionality to further analyze through searches, through fine-grained dashboards. You can only get so much on the screen. You need to be able to drill down to figure out why that item over there is red or yellow. Be able to drill down into more richer historical visualizations that give the trend of the entire time the employee has been part of your environment or the entity has been on your network. And then we have incident investigation, which is another feature provided by an insider threat monitoring system and supported by the common operating picture. Because with all the data you have, the insider threat monitoring system is effectively recording all the activity, all the network activity, all the behavior activity of your users and entities. And there's a lot of value provided by being able to look at something like this and be able to drill down and replay through like a movie how that user that's in red got to be at a high risk. And this is, just to point out, this is ForcePoint's SureView Insider Threat Display, which is another insider threat monitoring system on the market. There's others. There's a bunch on the market, actually. A lot of them are actually part of DHS's CDM, Next Phase Defend. Elastic has Kibana and machine learning. Splunk has user behavior analytics. We talked about ForcePoint, and even ArcSight, your traditional SIM product, does have a behavior analytic component. And since your organization may already lean heavily on one of these tools for the traditional purposes, layering on a behavior analytic component isn't going to be a complete start from scratch. And you'll even be further ahead of the game if your organization has mapped all of the insider threat behavior-centric data available to them. In the beginning, your implementation may be in more of a defensive stance, and then over time, you gradually mature into more playing offense. I have DHS up here. DHS actually has a common operating picture. It's part of their geospatial concept of operations, not insider threats. But if you go and check that out, it is a very great example of how local operating pictures and information feed up into a very high-level common operating picture that allows collaboration for national security-related threats and other events. In closing, remember that behavior analytics is a cornerstone of an insider threat monitoring system, and it's traditionally what SIMs are missing, are adding, or have added to their product suites. And also the richness of the data leveraged by the insider threat monitoring system is super critical. You need to build your data lake and maintain the integrity of the raw data, because the raw data is needed for investigations, prosecutions. It allows the ability to replay and rescore against advancements in behavior analytics. And this is all about continuously looking at better ways to find the needles. It should not be looked at as a set it and forget it system. And you will have to deal with scaling. You'll have to deal with data change. It's going to happen. Having the raw data protects you from the loss of the analytic information. If you bork your indexes, if your backups are trash, rebuild your system, go to your data lake, replay, reanalyze, and you're back to having what you need to protect your environment, protect your data. And it prevents you at any time from having to make hasty decisions about what data is important, what data isn't important. Collect everything, put it in your data lake, analyze it if you need it. You must clearly know your insiders, their profile today, decisions around why their attributes and profile changed, govern their access against continuous evaluation of their threat scores. The other thing is access to the common operating picture, the reports, the visualizations, the searching functions. It presents its own access management challenges, but and it's a gateway to all your data, right? The people that need the access to the right data for effective collaboration and threat mitigation also has to be considered. It's a fine balance that your organization has to come up with. And then you still have to consider the legal, the ethical, the organizational concerns and challenges with that. Finally, all the systems we build, manage, host, what have you, in some form have data that's important to someone. And that should make insider threat detection and mitigation important to everyone. As your insider threat program matures, leveraging an insider threat monitoring system and adding a behavioral analytic component to your existing system is essential to protecting your information that is most important to your business, your employees, and your customers. It should be essential to your compliance with GDPR and your consumer identity access management transformation. Allowing your customers to express consent about how their data is managed requires you to know all the places that your data is at and who has access to and when. And a system like this, effectively implemented and maintained, can provide the analytics and monitoring around ensuring that bad actors are identified and the data most important to your organization, employees, and partners remains protected. That's all I have today. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?